lessons he will teach tonight will not be pleasant, but the truth rarely is. Learning what we are up against will prevent us all from fighting futile battles and counting on institutions that will not deliver. It is on that note that I ask that we all give a warm round of applause to Chris Hedges.
Believe it or not, these are actually probably the good times right now. And once that currency collapses, then you vomit up these figures like Slobodan Milosevic, Radovan Karadzic, who everybody in Sarajevo considered to be insane because he was insane, Franjo Tudjman, or go back to Weimar and the Nazi Party, or the breakdown of Tsarist Russia, which opened the door for Lenin and the Bolsheviks. And the system or the breakdown of the liberal class is such that you continue to have figures like Clinton, like Obama, who are self-identified liberals, who speak in the traditional feel your pain, I feel your pain language of liberalism, and yet carry out policies that defy all of the values they purport to represent. I mean, I think Clinton is the poster child for this, with NAFTA, with so-called welfare reform, with the destruction of our banking system. You know, there are no bank closures in Canada because the Canadians never tore down the firewall between commercial and investment banks. The deregulation of the FCC, which has allowed Fox, Clear Channel, Disney, Viacom, about a half dozen corporations to buy up 90-something% of our systems of electronic communication. This was all done on the part of a Democrat, and it was done consciously. Clinton understood that if he took corporate money and did corporate bidding, he could raise, as he did by the 1990s, fundraising parity with the Republicans. He banked in the same way that Obama banks that the left, labor, working class will have nowhere else to go. They will always be frightened. And these figures that they cough up, especially this lunatic fringe of the Republican Party that is ascendant, no doubt is frightening. That fear will always bring these forces back in line. And so they don't actually have to address the creation of a permanent underclass in this country. They don't actually have to deal with the fact that millions of Americans are being foreclosed or losing their homes for bank repossessions. They don't even have to restore habeas corpus. Of course, the tragedy of the Obama administration is that what it has done is essentially codify the destruction of domestic and international law that was put in place by the Bush administration, all the while speaking in a different language, one that disarms many people among the liberal class or whose sympathies are with the liberal class who should know better. The danger with that is that because systems of power no longer respond to the interests of the ordinary citizen, a rage is engendered, and it's a legitimate rage, which is co-opted by proto-fascist and corporate power, who articulate this rage in a way that the liberal class won't. The liberals, or at least the liberal elite, continues to speak in the kind of dead language of policies and issues, without recognizing that that anger is something that we should appropriate for ourselves and begin to express. So you have it expressed through groups like the Tea Party, or militias, or these bizarre characters like Glenn Beck and Palin and all the others. And they promote, in the same way that Milosevic did, or if you go back and look at any of the the birth of totalitarian movements, this irrational political agenda. Everybody in the Tea Party wants to get government off their back, but nobody wants to end unemployment benefits. Nobody wants to get rid of Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. Everybody supports the military, as if the military isn't part of government, although, of course, it consumes half of all discretionary spending. And And what's most frightening about it is, of course, the language of violence. And I learned as a war correspondent that you first get people to speak in the language of violence before you get them to carry out acts of violence. So you have the language of violence, the celebration of the gun culture, and then they do what all of these movements do. It's something I watched in Yugoslavia. They pick out the defenseless and the weak within the society to scapegoat them for the problems that they endure. So suddenly America's decline becomes the result of undocumented workers, or Muslims, or homosexuals, or liberals. And I think that the rage that we are seeing expressed towards the liberal class is not a misplaced rage. These people have been betrayed. They understand the hypocrisy of figures like Clinton or Obama. But the danger is that they think that those figures actually represent these values. And so not only do they turn on the purported leaders of the liberal establishment, but they turn on the values that supposedly these leaders seek to inculcate within the wider society. And that becomes very dangerous. Because in the end, they're values that I think are vitally important and that I promote. I don't think that at this point we have a lot of time left. It's not accidental that the environmental crisis is intimately twinned with the economic crisis. We have unleashed, and I think in sort of, we would call them in my seminary training, forces of death, systems of death, that commodify everything, human beings and the natural world, that in the name of profit they exploit until exhaustion or collapse. And the ability of these corporate forces to go to Copenhagen and shred Kyoto, to do nothing to halt the dependence that we have not only on fossil fuels like oil and natural gas, but also coal. The destruction of watersheds. I've been working in southern West Virginia on a new book, and it is, I drive through the coal fields of southern West Virginia, and I feel like I'm in Bosnia. The water is polluted, the air is polluted, it's just a burned out, desolate landscape. The tops are being blasted off all the mountains. People are being literally ethnically cleansed from their land and poisoned. I went to the activist Judy Bond's memorial service, 57 years old, and like everyone around her is dying of cancer. And what we have allowed these forces to do is reconfigure American society into a form of neo-feudalism, where we have a privileged elite and two-thirds of the country who live in a kind of state of desperation. And that, of course, is what globalization has writ large across the planet, if you read the stories out of southern China or out of India. And the question now is, how do we fight back? If all of the traditional mechanisms by which citizens could be heard, not in a radical sense, but at least that some of the injustices that had been visited upon the citizenry could be addressed, if all of those are closed, if these supranational forces have become, as they have, more powerful than the nation state itself, if everything that is rammed through is an assault on our capacity to sustain ourselves and our dignity. I mean, look at the Obama health care bill. You know, for all the right wing criticizes Obamacare for all the wrong reasons, perhaps, but they're not wrong in criticizing the bill. The bill itself, if you read the 2,000 pages, all of which was, of course, written by lobbyists, becomes the equivalent of the bank bailout bill for the pharmaceutical and insurance industry. $400 billion in subsidies. Absolutely no protection. You're watching them do waiver after waiver because these companies don't want to insure chronically ill children. And in essence, we are allowing, I mean, capitalists shouldn't be allowed anywhere near a healthcare system. In moral terms, it is legal in the United States for a corporation to hold sick children hostage while their parents bankrupt themselves trying to save their sons or daughters. That's the system that we allow the corporate state to impose. And there will be no capacity to rectify the wrongs and injustices and abuse that is meted out by the corporate state as long as we appeal to the traditional liberal institutions that once were capable of hearing us and now have shut their ears. The press, the Democratic Party, culture, which of course has been completely corporatized. I don't need to tell anyone in this room about what they're trying to do to public education. The breaking of public sector unions. It is the utter disempowerment of the American people. And my fear is that because there is a self-fulfilling prophecy to the political deterioration, because we are now watching the lunatic fringe of the political establishment become empowered, and we have a right to fear these people and who they represent, we will continue in the self-destructive pattern of not standing up to a democratic and a liberal establishment that has created, I believe, this reconfiguration of the political landscape.
Thank you very much.